Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh to some and peace out to the rest of you. Blackest hearted, blackest minded, blackest man on social media, signing black in and shining again, asking you to hit that share button because the message is more important than the messenger. Here's the deal. I want to shout out first to Mr. Fantastic 824. Thanks for having me on yesterday. I had to leave in a rush and I didn't want to interrupt them to say goodbye. So I wasn't just trying to diss y'all. I just had to go in a rush because it was late where I live and I had to be up early this morning to teach. And I still got another class to teach in less than an hour. Now, your topic was on point. You and I happened to cover it unknowingly on the same day. While I was on the live stream, mine became public as I had already uploaded it. Here's the deal too. Let me tell y'all this, black folk as a whole. We've made a mistake. Actually, we've made two mistakes. One mistake we've made multiple times. The mistake that we made multiple times is that when we are outside in the rest of the world, we actually are not the ones who become good allies. I mean, we tried it with some people. Usually we have tried it with people that were not on our side. We tried it with Latin Americans. As we tried it with Latin Americans, therein lied the issue. Of course, you know, it wasn't even all of them, but many of them did side against us later on. And that bothered the hell out of us. There was a time when the Chinese in America were seen as a type of ally. 50s. But in the 60s, after King's death, the riot started. What wound up happening was that white America saw the Chinese as being a better minority because they did not riot like we did. They didn't protest like we did. So they allowed the Chinese and the Koreans to then move up a little bit more. And the Vietnam War somewhat helped in that regard because the Chinese that lived in America at that point were Confucian and therefore not the communist atheist that the people back in China had become. So they were allowed to move up a little more. So too were the Koreans. The Japanese were not held back anymore. In a nutshell, people were allowed to move up based on two things. Not being us and distancing themselves from us. That happened with the Indians, with the Eastern Asians, and happened with many Latin Americans. But we have to remember that these regions have more than one nationality to them. India and Pakistan are not friendly countries for black people. Bangladesh, from my understanding, is different. They're not harming black people there. Now, they might have skin bleach, but they're not trying to harm black people there. They don't hate us like that. Now, as far as them being allies, I can't tell you that they're allies. I can simply tell you that they're not enemies the way that Pakistanis and Indians would be. And there are Indians that are individually for us. Same with some people from Pakistan that are individually for us. They do exist, but they're individuals. Their societies are not this way. Their societies are not even neutral. That's the difference. It's the same thing with Latin Americans. They're not all one nationality. Mexico as a society is not neutral towards us. They're just not necessarily dangerous for us. But they're not allies. Because when it comes down to choosing between us and Massa, many of them are going to choose Massa. You see it more than just the prison system. You can see it in many places. They're going to walk through whatever door opens up and leave your ass behind. You can march down that hallway with them. But if someone opens the door and signals them and says, hey, come on in, they're not going to tap you on the shoulder and point to the door. They're going to slip in and then say, well, I took this opportunity. You just didn't take it. That's what it really comes down to. But all Latin Americans aren't Mexican. Costa Ricans have differing attitudes. Colombia as a society, you could probably say is neutral now when it comes to treating black folks from different places. I mean, it's a tricky bag to try to assess, but as far as taking Colombians as enemies, I'm not so sure we could do that. Maybe you know something I don't. But what I'm saying is that the entire world is not an enemy. See, not being your ally is different from outright being your enemy. There are people that don't know what to make of you. Native Americans are different tribes. They have more contact with each other across tribal lines than what they have with the African American community as a whole. But the fact is, at the end of the day, Native Americans are not allies or enemies because they have differing attitudes towards us. And most of them don't know what to make because they don't see us a whole lot. We're on TV. They know the TV can't possibly be real all the time, so they got to wait till they meet us in person. See what's true and see what's not. So everybody, see, back in 1990, there were some people that were telling us that other POC were not our friends. Okay, fine. 1995, I was hearing that all the time in Atlanta. So I'm saying this to say that we've been for either 25 or for 30 years hearing that other people are not our friends, they're not our allies. Okay, fine. Who said that they're all our enemies? I'm mentioning this for a reason. Being pro-black, and I mean authentically pro-black as I was shown by elders when I was a kid, never meant you go and you make enemies of people that are not enemies. Now, it does mean you're careful about who you call an ally, especially about in whom you will put your trust. But who you make an enemy is more than just who's not your ally. You can treat many Latin Americans that live in the United States like enemies. Dominicans and Puerto Ricans are divided on this subject. They're also confronting this subject. The Indian community is not divided on it. Individuals have differing ideas, but they're not even going to tell their elders we disagree. Whereas the Dominicans and the Puerto Ricans, the young ones can say, we disagree with you on this subject. There's nothing wrong with black folk that ain't wrong with us too. That's real. That's true. The Pakistani community is not divided on this. The young ones generally are not as racist. The elders are. The young ones are not going to even so much as tell the elders we disagree with you. They're not going to say that. They do disagree, but they're not going to tell them that. So the anti-black strains that go through those communities is unchecked, whereas the anti-black strain among Puerto Ricans and Dominicans is at least checked. So it is complicated. And it does help to at least be willing to give individuals a chance so that you can learn about their societies. And then you can be better informed. Do you think I would tell you that a group of people are not our enemies if they were not our enemies? You've heard how I've talked about different communities. I'm an SYSBM man. I will also tell you, leave these women alone if they come from communities that have anti-black strains unchecked. I'll tell you that in a minute. That dark-skinned Indian woman looks like a sister. So, what do people feel? That's a legitimate question to ask. So I do say that. And I'm sitting up here and I'm telling you that Southeastern nations are not the enemy. Now, if there's anybody that's going to be an ally, it would be them. But I'm not assuming that they're going to be allies or enemies. They're not enemies right now. That is not the case. And we have a common enemy, and that right now, at this point, that is the Chinese. But we wouldn't know that. And one of the reasons we would not know that is because we black folks don't take in information very well. We're still in this stage of shock. I'll relate a story to give you an idea of what I mean, and then you'll know what I'm talking about. When I worked at a Muslim school in the States, a little boy turned up missing, and his mother was a teacher. His mother was my daughter's teacher, and I was his teacher, one of his teachers. And this little boy just vanished, turned up missing. Now, we later learned he was running from his dad because his dad was abusive as hell. May Allah break his hands if he hasn't already. But he was running from his father. At the time, we all had to look for this boy, try to find him. I went into the library, and I checked to make sure he was not hiding in one of those hiding places. When I made sure of this, I was getting ready to close the library so that he could not sneak in afterwards. I sent a text to his mother, and she was standing outside, panicking and crying and all this, looking at her phone, waiting on any news. I sent a text to his mother, ma'am, nobody is in the library, no hiding places are filled up. I'm closing and locking the library so he can't sneak back in later. She didn't read the text. Not at all. When the text came on her screen, before she even fully read it, she ran to the library calling this boy's name. I said to her, ma'am, excuse me, that was my text message. He's not in there. And she didn't hear me. I told her 5 times. I was following right behind her. I wasn't going to grab her. Muslim men don't grab Muslim women unless it's an emergency. But she went through this extra anguish because she didn't read. I understand in that situation. This is a grieving mother. I would not tactically advise her to go into that mode of thinking. I would not do so. But what I would say to her is that that's going to compound your grief. But now she knows that. We are somewhat in that stage that she's in, and we're locked into it. And this has meant that we can't get our facts together and make detailed observations, but we're trying to preach and teach to each other while being unwilling to take in any new information. That is the epitome of a nigger. Now, we can say things about women doing this stuff, but when the men do it, I don't have a leg to stand on trying to defend your ignorant behinds. And that's how we men become lost. Ideologically lost, logically lost. We can't make sense out of any two ideas that we may have in our head at the same time because they can't even coexist except in our head. That's how we've done it. And consequently, what I see is that we're about to make a mistake if we're not careful. We're going to make another enemy out of someone that was not an enemy before. Now, we did this in Liberia with our own people. And that was stupid as hell. The war did not start because of Americo-Liberians starting the violence. That wasn't it. But in retaliation to Americo-Liberians hogging the power and the economy, a non-Americo-Liberian president, the first one, began to fight back. The problem is he was not fighting back for all the tribes. He was fighting back only for his own tribe. He didn't care what happened to the other tribes. And this led to another problem. This led to something else. So it was bad. Yeah, it was really bad. You see, this guy started a war that went on for decades, and now tribes don't matter, and whether you're Americo-Liberian, meaning Congo, and they're in their English, not meaning Congolese, but they use Congo to mean American Liberian, and whichever one you are no longer matters, because eventually the war degenerated into no longer even being about these things, just every man for himself. So, that being said, let's call this what the hell it is. We have not proven that we're not going to be oppressors when we get power. I wish we had. We have proven that we will not oppress the people that used to oppress us. Now that we have proven. Not one white man has ever been poor in Liberia, according to most Liberians I've ever met. They can't become citizens, but they've never been poor. Not one Lebanese Arab has ever been poor in Liberia, according to them. They can't become citizens either, but they've never been poor. So I want you to stop and think about what the hell that means. We don't oppress the people that have oppressed us, but we'll turn around and oppress ourselves and people that have not oppressed us and look down on them. And this is not something I'm going to support. I do support us I support our right to not be mistreated. I support our right to be treated fairly. But I do not support our right to turn around and do to people that didn't do anything to us what someone else did to us. Because I'm going to tell you now, Israel, that's the basis of the Israeli state at this point. What the Nazis did to them, they're going to do to the Palestinians. And what the Israelis did to the Palestinians, you give them some power over another group of people, especially if they're darker, they'll do it to them, but not to the Germans. Or not to the Israelis. That's the truth of oppression. And we're going to have to, if we want control and power and we want God to be on our side, we're going to have to be the people that are not going to continue that cycle. Because a lot of people have been oppressed, and they've turned and oppressed people that didn't do anything to them later on. And not oppress the ones, didn't even take vengeance on the ones that oppressed them. Does that sound familiar? Now, we've done all of this in the past. Are we going to stop this at some point? And are we going to even allow ourselves to become well enough informed so that we don't repeat this mistake? Most of us wouldn't do it. What is another example? What I've been talking about the past few weeks. A non-black man, light-skin motivation will write about one thing. The black community is they're not even fighting back against white folk. But then they want to turn around and start going hard on lighter-skinned people and other people of color. Not necessarily because every other people of color have turned on us per se. Because I mean, they're not really doing that. They want to go in on people that ain't done nothing to us. I.e., those of us ourselves with the rarer phenotype or the more recessive phenotype. That's what I'm seeing now. They had a point. They put up a video of a guy reciting a poem, said something about that's just like a light-skinned nigga. And he was as much of a fairy as they come, wearing makeup while he was talking this stuff. He had nothing to say about white folks. He had nothing to say even about other people of color that had done this. All this aggression from white folks and from other people of color that have sided with white against us is now being aimed at a subsection of the black community that ain't done nothing to the rest of its community. This is the truth of the matter. And we're also aiming a lot of our vitriol towards our poorest members. We're aiming a lot of our vitriol towards short men. If you think chocolate sisters catch it, and they may catch it in childhood, you should see what happens to a short man in adulthood in the black community. Vitriol, hatred. Poor black men, the ones that ain't got no money. Vitriol, hatred. How dare you not have no money even though the system was set up for that? Oh my God. You get the idea. I think I said enough. It's time for me to go get ready to teach. But thanks again. I really appreciate that, Mr. Fantastic. Hopefully, black folks, you will make what I've said untrue. Because I want to continue to advocate for people who are traumatized. However, if you're going to be the people who will do the same thing others have done and visit trauma on those that did not traumatize us, I cannot advocate for you. I want you to be completely independent of or dominant over other races, whichever makes us the safest. But I will not advocate for anything that gives us the opportunity to traumatize innocent groups of people if that's what we're about to do. I hope that what I've said is a benefit, and I hope one day it won't be true anymore, and I mean that from the bottom of my black heart, because I do love us. Black is sort of black. Oh, and by the way, making enemies out of people that are not enemies, and in case I didn't say it before, that's very not pro-black. Black is sort of black, sign of blackout, assalamu alaikum. Black, heterosexual, male power, specifically because other POC and Boom Shika and Zaddy and Amber and Becky don't like it.